I remember when I was reading this, like my friend's sister-in-law, who's older than us and was old, like an adult while we were like at the later end of our teens, uh, super feminist, which like cool, but still not really up on that at this time. And her, criticism was that like Bella's this character that's like she's always got to be saved. That's why I
Right.
was like, oh, she's so clumsy. She can't like just exist, She has to be saved, and she's painted as this character that like needs constant saving, and guys like are always treating her like she's like delicate and like can't fend for herself, and seemingly she can't, or like
Right.
seems to also think of herself that way to some degree, which isn't super great. I also think we mostly grow out of that, and that's like it's just part of like this girl fantasy of like needing to be needed and needing to like uh, desire, like it's the savior fantasy, it's the hero fantasy, it's the
Princess fantasy.
prince,
Yeah.
yeah, the princess, damsel in distress fantasy. And I don't think you just sort of, you can do have the whole gender conversation about that, I'm sure, and how it's, you know, we're socialized to feel this way about ourselves as women, but also like you grow out of it, I think, or
Well, I
I
think
did.
you're
But
touching on something though. I think that is one of the major conflicts. So it's we could look at this through like kind of like a college classroom feminist lens. We could, and you could make a lot of critiques about it. Sure, we've done it on this podcast before, but there's also the very real kind of thing inside. I don't want to generalize too much, but like kind of inside a lot of young women, right, and young men too. I mean, this isn't like to like you said, we could separate out sexes, genders, but like we don't have to. But there is that kind of I want to be saved, right? Like it's like, and there's two
or
things,
I want to do the saving. Like, I don't
right?
know what male fantasy is like at that age. I assume it's far more sexual.
It's all sex. Yeah, it is. It is.
I
It is. This
assume
girl's
it's
gonna
far
touch my
more
penis.
sexual. And for women, I think, yeah, and for girls, I think it's like, I want him to want to kiss me tenderly
Yeah, hold my head.
and hold my hand
Yeah.
and take me out and like be nice to me. And, like it's a different, I think it's just such a different thing. Like,
Well, it's because they treat those two things as if they're not mutually exclusive. Like they are interlinked somewhat. But I think when we do like kind of like a feminist lens on books like this, especially a character like Bella, it's just it's we're pretending that both things can't be true at the same time, right? Like yeah, maybe Bella is a little bit too passive damsel in distress, but like, and we could argue that that's
but she's different.
yeah, but like there's also because there's that you can do both,
Yeah.
right? Like you can
Yeah.
believe that yes, this is taking away
Well,
a
yeah,
woman's
it's all of the
agency,
fantasy.
right? But it's also touching on the very real fantasy of
You
yeah,
can
the
be the hot
princess.
girl, you can
Yeah,
be the girl that everyone wants at school, you can also be the weirdo, you can be different, you can be the smart girl, you can be the girl who hangs out with monsters and listens to rock. Like, it's just like it's every
hold you in my arms.
yeah, man. It's a good song.
I just want you to hold.
Yeah, it's a good fucking
It's
song.
fucking great, dude. Like I put that on when you sent me that you sent me that acknowledgement. So I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? I haven't listened to Muse in a while, and they haven't dropped an album since like 2008. So like, I put that
Oh,
on. I
dude,
was
I'll
like,
throw
oh,
on
this
some
is a
views every once in
great.
a while.
This is a
He'll still
great
have some views
track,
on his
dude.
iPod. I
Yeah,
guess on his iPhone. Throw it
that's a
on in the
great
car
track,
every once
dude.
in a while.
That's a great fucking track, man. Like it holds up. Not everything holds up
Yeah,
10 years later. This thing, fuck, that
catchy as
song
shit.
holds up. Yeah.
Starlight.
But you are like that's what like it is this conflict, and it's a very real conflict, and it doesn't negate the feminist
Well, especially
critique,
when you don't fucking know who you are because you're a
right?
fucking 17-year-old.
But I just mean like both
And
are
I think
valid.
I think that's fucking fine. You
Well,
know,
yeah, exactly.
I
Like
think it's
both
fine. Like
are
I think you, and I think yeah, they're both totally valid.
right.
Like it, and in all of those ways, this isn't a good book, and it's also still plenty enough compelling for me to want to read it. And it was
Exactly. Yeah.
certainly tapping into all of the things that I wanted it to when I was reading it for the first time.
And this is
And
where
also, there's that like very hot part that's also very cringe when Bella is like, "What's tempting you more, my blood or my body?"
ooh, yeah, that is
Cringe. There are a lot of cringe moments,
it's cringe, but
and
if Kristen
especially
Stewart
toward
said
the
that to
end.
me, I would be like,
Ugh.
yeah. But yeah, there is that level of it too. But yeah, you're right. Like both are valid. Like we could go, and this would make me think of that Pauline Kael essay, so Trash Art, where she talks about how like just because something like Twilight, which we would call not high-minded art, gives us pleasure, like a candy bar gives us pleasure, doesn't mean we
Yeah.
have to fit it into these frameworks, right? Like it doesn't. It can just be that. It can just be a good piece of trash art that we enjoy. It doesn't have to be forced into these frameworks of like, well, it's not a good book because it doesn't do this high-minded, like, or it's not a this, as we start applying all these high-minded critiques to it. Like
Yeah,
she
and
just
when you
talks
go
about
for enough school, I think there's an element of shame that's like supposed to be around it that I think you also probably grow out of a lot of once you're out of that world.
dude,
I
that's
think a lot of people do.
I'm glad you brought that up because this is a constant theme on Heavy Board about being shamed into reading, and this is a different type of shame, but it exists, and it exists very much in the high-minded kind of academic world, right? Like this kind of oh, you read that? Oh, you
Oh,
read
you read
that?
those mom thriller books?
Oh,
That's
right, yeah,
nice. It's good that you read. You
right.
know,
Or it's
it's
or
that. But it's like, yeah, fucking it is
right,
good that you read. Like, have fun.
exactly,
Like,
yeah.
you don't have to feel all that shame because you were like, I mean, it's
And we
different if you're like, I guess, an English major and you're like, I need to be well read to feel like not a piece of shit. And that's a whole other world of neuroticism. But yeah, you don't, I feel like there's this fucked up thing that, you know, you have to pretend that you're not going to be interested in reading The Hunger Games
right.
because you, I don't know, want to write like you only read literary shit.
Well, it's a judgment. It's also a like, well, you're less than, right? It makes people feel better about themselves to say, well, I
Well,
only
they're going to
read
judge your taste.
that, which
Think
you can
that you like
judge.
hold it on some like
We're pro
because you do
judgment.
meet
Yeah.
people that will like hold those things at the I don't know. Like I have a
Yeah.
lot of conflicting feelings about this.
Yeah, I mean, which is normal. And again, listeners, this podcast is pro judgment. Like we're
Yeah,
pro
we're very judgmental.
making a
So
judgment, but don't hide away from that judgment with like, well, that's low minded, right? Like, yeah, like that's not a reason to be judgmental. Like, you can be judgmental. It's just not a good reason to be. I don't know. This is why I just think of like trash art is one thing. This kind of lowbrow, like Pauline Kael calls it a candy bar, right? Like we enjoy trash art, like we enjoy eating the Snickers bar.
junk
Okay, junk food, but it's more, but you know, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
not without
Like, yeah, like
not without its nutritional benefits.
right, yeah, not without its nutritional benefits, but you should
It
probably
brings
eat.
joy.
Yeah, but there is this shame right there, and then there's this level of superiority, especially when we get towards the academic side of things. It's like, okay, being well read, right? I like this book and you like that book, therefore I'm better than you, right? Or I'm smarter
Or
than
well, it's
you,
more
or
like, oh,
I'm
you didn't judge that book to be not good
right.
in this framework. And it's not that you don't, you can understand that it's not, you know, well written
Right.
and still, you know, like you can have a different taste for like a literary novel, but like this like these are books that are like 600 pages long that you know we'll read in 3 days and then I'll spend 2 weeks reading a 200 page Virginia Woolf novel.
Yeah.
It's like a really different like kind of turning off your brain a little bit reading. It's more like watching TV.
Well, and those two contradictions. So like some people would argue that you can't do both, but like of course we can. Why can't we? Right? Like why can't we have both?
Do
And
both what?
well, like have
Judge it and enjoy it.
well understand it for what it is and still have that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
same thing with the what we were talking about, like the kind of what a feminist critique of this would be, or at least a feminist critique of the Bella character. You can have that, and it's a contradiction of, well, Bella's just a teenage girl, but you can have both contradictions in your head at the same time, because I mean it's a fucking book, people. Like, it's not it's a fucking fictional story. Like, we can have contradictory thoughts about the same thing in our head at the same time, and like both can be correct, kind of, like both can be valid, not necessarily correct because they're opinions on books, but like, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get too
Remember
bogged
when
down.
Jacob says, "I'm so mad I could spit"?
I do
That was one of
remember
my
that
favorite
very
ones.
distinctly and being like, oh, cringe. Fuck, I gotta pee, hold up.